Hello everyone and welcome to our Fiscal Talk. Today we are starting a very interesting Fiscal Talk series with Darko Pavic, our co-founder and board member, a fiscalization expert with more than 20 years of experience in fiscalization area and retail technology. He will share a lot of valuable information with us, so make sure you keep watching. And like I promised, we have one of the best fiscalization experts with us today. Darko, hello, welcome, and it is really great to have you here today.
Hello, Theodora. It's nice to see you, nice to talk to you. And thanks for the flowers, so the best expert in the world.
Thank you for that. You know what? My job is to make the announcement, and now we will have a few minutes to actually prove that, and I know we will.
Yes.
Absolutely. So thanks again for accepting to talk with me and to all our audience in the next few minutes about one very important topic, and that is fiscal environment in general. Just to give a brief introduction, I feel that if we don't know fiscalization, it seems simple, but once we start to uncover it a little bit, we see the complexity. And then once we learn all of that, we see, oh, it is simple, but now when we know everything. So my first question to you is to ask you to explain us briefly the fiscal environment in general.
Yeah, you are totally right. If you want to put it in one sentence, you can. And if you do that, it's really sounds really simple. So actually, it's all about taxes. That's it. This is the fiscalization. The governments are trying to find the best way how to control the flow, let's say, of the taxes so that the taxpayers are really paying the taxes. This is the initial idea of the fiscalization, and it's quite simple. But then if you start to think about how to implement that and how to force the retailer to work in a certain way, then the complexity starts. And that's why if you go deep into the detail and if you go into the detail of each country by itself, then you see the real complexity in each and every country. So, but at the end, it's just controlling of the taxes and collecting of the taxes. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, but maybe I would like maybe just to describe this environment a little bit more in detail, because the basic is simple. But then let's go more into detail and let's understand what are the differences between different types of the fiscalization, why they are so important or less important, let's say, why they are complex or less complex.
Let's.
Yes.
Yeah. I want to hear you say, explain us that. I just wanted to say we have that duality in fiscalization. Simple, but if you really want to implement it and you're a retailer, it becomes complex. So let's hear more about it, and then later the perspective from retailers' side.
Yes, so let's start with the different types of the fiscalization. So I told you, basically the governments want to force the retailer to work on a certain way. If they do that, there are three ways, and in the world you can find the three different types how they are trying to do that. One, or the first one, they are trying to force the retailer to use the special fiscal devices. These are maybe the fiscal printer or some kind of signature devices or whatever. So they have to use this kind of fiscal devices. The taxes are usually saved on those devices, and the government can access them on some way. This is the first type of the fiscalization, and I would like to say this is the most common way of the fiscalization in the world. The second one we call software-based fiscalization. This is the fiscalization where the retailer has either to use the piece of software, which is installed maybe on the POS locally, or they have to send data to another part of the software somewhere, mostly at the fiscal authority side, and we call this type as well software-based fiscalization. And then the third one are combined, let's say, where the governments are forcing retailer to use the piece of software and the piece of hardware. The best example would be Austria, for example, because there you have to use the smart card reader and the smart cards to sign the transactions. And then you have to send those transactions to the authority even real time. And this is the software-based fiscalization, as I just told you in the type 2. So the type 3 is a combination of the hardware and software. So sounds again very simple.
Yes.
And technically, it is really not that complex, because technically the POS application has always interface somehow with a piece of software. Even if you are using hardware like fiscal printer, for example, you are not accessing directly those hardware, but you are using the driver of those hardware to integrate it into the POS application. So technically, base of each and every fiscalization is always integration of the piece of the software into the POS application. Okay.
Yeah.
For the good developer, it's a really not big issue to implement and to integrate piece of software in own application. They are doing it daily, either, for example, for the hand scanners or scales or whatever. So they know to do that. This is not the complexity. The complexity, and I will make a break in a second so that you can ask. The complexity is in the process how to use this part of hardware and part of a piece of software and so on, because this is the translation that is needed from the legal requirement, let's say, to use the piece of hardware or piece of software into the retail process. Means how to do returns, how to do discounts, how to do special voids or whatever. So whatever the retailer wants to do has to be according to the law, and this is the complexity, to make it according to the law.
Right. So actually, great general overview of how simple it is and then how it becomes complex. So it becomes complex when we're actually dealing with it, right? When we actually have to implement something to work by the law, and in the same time make sure all the requirements, fiscal and technical, are done right.
Let me please add on the top something, because the complexity is not in the fiscal law. And please hear it well, not in the fiscal law. So everybody is telling you, of course, fiscal laws are very complex and so on. No, they are not. The fiscal law by itself is very simple. The complexity is in the retail environment. Retail environment is very complex. Each and every retailer is implementing or using its own processes to do something. And now you have a rule, let's say, which is quite simple, that you have to mirror, integrate as well in all those processes. So this means if you have a retailer which is running e-commerce, social commerce, self-checkouts, traditional POSs, and all of those areas means different retail processes, and then maybe mobile POS as well. And then maybe they have supermarkets, discount stores, and even petrol station near to them. You see? So you have 4 or 5 different dimensions of the different retail processes. And now you have to implement one very simple rule, which is at the end simple, into all those different environments and different applications maybe, and different software and different hardware. This is the complexity. So the retailers are complex.
Okay. Now I definitely understand what you wanted to say, and it totally makes sense. Before we finish today's fiscal talk, and promise you will come again because we need to hear more of this. My question is, besides the retail processes that are complex to actually integrate the fiscal rules and laws, I think one of the big perspectives that adds to complexity is actually the international perspective. Am I right?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. I forgot that totally. Absolutely. So imagine I like to say Japanese guys and Japanese retailers, because for people in Europe, Japan is far, far away. So this is what I want to say. Imagine the retailer who is far, far away from the European fiscal countries. And this company wants to expand, let's say, and open the stores in European countries. They don't talk the language. They don't know the mentality. They are learning that. They learn for sure and quite fast. That's no problem with that. But it's complexity which they have to solve. Then there are certain let's say best practices in each of the country, which are not related to the laws, but to the mentality of the consumers. What consumers likes in China, maybe they don't like in Japan, or maybe in Europe, or in USA. So the consumers are dictating at the end the best practices, and retailer has to know that. So this means you have typical international points like language, mentality, and so on. Then you have the consumer by itself, which is totally different. And then you have the IT systems, which are maybe forced by the government through the fiscal authority or by other laws as well. And all of that, they have to implement in their own processes and IT environment. Huge work, I can tell you.
Right, absolutely. And I can definitely see that. So to sum it up, I was listening carefully. I always try to do that. If we think about fiscalization, fiscal law, it is simple. Once we try to implement it and mirror it to retail processes, it's complex. Once we add the international perspective, it's even more complex. So it blows. So I assume there are many challenges retailers face in those moments, but I will leave these questions for the next fiscal talk. So I promise you'll come again and save some time for talking to me and to our audience, because I know they want to hear you explaining the challenges and how to overcome them. Okay?
Yeah. So let's. Yeah, I can continue for hours.
I know.
Like this subject definitely. So I will be happy to discuss with you again in the next fiscal talk some of those points, maybe even more detailed. But you're right, let's focus on how to solve those problems and how to overcome all those challenges in the end and to be the winner, let's say, as a winner in the new market. Yeah. So again, it's not that complex. So the complexity is later.
It's not.
But yeah, okay. So it's not that complex, like a fiscal law itself. Basically, I see just 4 points that are absolutely needed in order to master all those requirements, issues, topics, and at the end challenges as well. So the first one is to have the right specialist on your side, because this is the very specific skill that you need in the head and in the soul of the people which are running this kind of projects. It's not enough just to have IT guy, because IT guys, they totally understand, of course, algorithms, and they know how to implement them. But they are missing other parts which you need as well, and this is legal part. You need definitely some kind of legal specialist, and you definitely need a person which is master of the retail processes by itself. Right. Because only if you have those 3 skills, and the best would be in one head, in one person, then you can run this project really, really good. So you need a person which is able to understand the law, which is able to understand and design the retail processes, and which is able to understand and design architectures and algorithms for the implementation of the POS application, self-checkout applications, or whatever. So this is the first, you see, it's a simple first point, right?
Absolutely resources. Simple. Yeah, specialized skill set, but it makes sense.
Exactly, yeah. The second one is the right architecture of your solution. I don't think that you have to change your POS architecture, and I don't think that POS architecture is so important. I think the more important is the functionality at the end, which is fulfilling the requirements of your consumers, of retailer consumers, of course. But nevertheless, I think it's very important to treat the fiscal requirements as a separate part of your architecture, because you will need these separate modules in different environments, in self-checkout environment, in e-commerce environment, in whatever environment, Amazon Go-like environment, and so on. If you implement this fiscal requirement always again in all of those parts, you will develop always again and again the same thing. So the best way is to put it outside somehow as a part of the outside architecture, let's say, and then to interface. So this means the second point is to create the right architecture to approach the international markets. And this would mean to put the fiscal requirements in a separate piece of software, in a separate piece of module or whatever. So just to be separate, okay?
Right.
The third point, you see, this is simple as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I see. Yes.
The third point, and this is also simple, at the end, this is the implementation of this separate module. If you make it, let's say, service-based, whatever means, whatever technology you use, but if it's service based, so this means you access it like a service, like a web service or microservice or whatever, then you can really use it wherever and whenever is needed. Otherwise, if it's monolithical part that you have to, or software that you have to install somewhere locally or whatever, you will run again in the trouble of maintenance, in the trouble of interfacing, and so on. So it has to be implemented not only like a separate module, but also on the way that it's a service-based module, let's say. Okay?
Absolutely. It makes sense. When you put it this way, absolutely makes sense. Can't wait to hear the fourth part.
The fourth part is actually the zero part. So this means this is I started numbering with 1, 2, 3, but now I want to put 0 in front of all those numbers. It's not number 4, it's a number 0. Why? Because it's a root of everything. And root of everything is the knowledge. If you don't know what you have to do, you will not be able to create modules, you will not be able to understand, nothing you will be able to do, because first you need to know exactly what has to be done. And if you want to know, there are 3 areas that you have to know. Remember on the skill that I told you, you need 3 skills. It's the same like knowledge. You have 3 different knowledges. First, the legal knowledge. You need, let's say, the original fiscal law. Not tamed, not discussed, not commented, nothing. Just a piece of paper as the government issue it. You need it.
Right.
So, and then you have to understand it, of course. But this is the first knowledge based on this document. The second knowledge is the translation of this document into the retail specific language, like we call it. So this is to translate what the government wants from you as a retailer into the language, how to do it as a retailer, according to your processes. So this is the second knowledge. And the third knowledge that you need to have is how to implement that in technically, as a piece of software, as a web service, as whatever. So this kind of knowledge, you either have in your company, or you can buy it somewhere on the market or whatever, but you will need it definitely.
Okay, so I like this conclusion, and not about the complexity, not about the simplicity, but we can definitely conclude that knowledge is power. And for everything, we need the right kind of knowledge. We just need to know what kind of knowledge we need. So I will definitely finish this fiscal talk with this powerful quote, not by us, but that we all know in the world, and that is knowledge is power. And I will thank you for being part of this fiscal talk, as well as our dear audience. Thanks for following us, and thanks for watching us. Like we said, knowledge is power. So in order to fulfill that, we will see you next week as well. Bye, everyone. Bye,
It was my pleasure.
I'll talk to you soon.
Again soon.
Yes.
Bye, everybody. Bye.